the fireside. So welcome everyone. If you're here for the Communication Cascade, Ensuring Leadership Messages Reach Every Level webinar, you're absolutely in the right place. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started here. If we haven't met before, hello, I'm Rebecca. I'll be your host for today. I'm the community manager here at Bucket List. And first housekeeping item, chat box feature, we have opened it, so it's set to everyone can speak to everyone. As long as your blue drop down says everyone, you're good to go. We also have the Q&A box open, so there's a question you would like us to address at the end. Feel free to pop it in there so it doesn't get lost with all the chatter going on in the chat box. Professional development credits will be shown at the end, and we are recording this session, so we will send it out via email sometime after the event, likely early next week. All right. Now, let's take a few moments here to set the stage for the conversation. Communicating as a leader can feel like a lot of pressure. Every time we open our mouths, it's an opportunity to be misunderstood. And these misunderstandings aren't harmless. We might hurt someone's feelings. We might stay up all night regretting something that we said that day. And aside from all of that, misunderstandings costed US businesses an estimated $1.2 trillion each year. But when we get communication right, it's one of the most powerful tools that we have as leaders. Workplaces with strong communication strategies see 4.5 times higher retention rates. Employees who feel that there's transparency in the communication at work are 12 times more satisfied with their jobs. And teams that communicate effectively report to be about 25% more productive. So yes, communication is hard, but it's also the key to creating trust, retention, and results. And that's what we want to unpack here together today. How to move towards communication that builds culture and drives impact. And so for today, there are three key themes or topics that we want to touch upon. We want to talk about tactics to ensure that our leadership messages are being understood at every level. We want to talk about how to communicate difficult changes while maintaining that credibility and keeping people engaged, because change is very hard for many of us. And lastly, we want to talk about utilizing recognition as a communication strategy to validate, understand, and amplify those messages. And so I will ask the panel to introduce themselves, but before we do that, we want to run a really quick poll because we know every team is really different, so we want to really start by hearing from you. So what are the biggest communication challenges you're facing as a leader right now? You can pick your top two, and these insights will help us shape how we approach our discussion today. And so as you fill that in, we can totally introduce the panel. Annie, since you're moderating, I'll let you take the wheel for introductions. We can pass around the room. And once we're all done with the introductions, we'll share the poll results and we can talk about it before we dive into the fireside. All right, Annie, go ahead.
Amazing. Thank you, Rebecca. And hi, everyone. My name is Annie Rosenkrantz. I lead the people and culture function for the Americas at HiBob. I've been here for about 4 years, and communication is very much a part of the day-to-day for anyone in HR and really any leader. So I'm really excited to talk about this meaty topic with all of you. As we can see, everyone from all around the world can relate to this topic, and I have a feeling when we get the results of the poll in a few minutes, we'll see this is a pretty resonant topic that we can all learn from. So really happy to be here, excited to moderate, and I will pass it off to our first panelist, Jessica, to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Annie, for that passover. My name is Jessica. I manage our customer onboarding team here at Bucket List Rewards. We're all things recognition and rewards here at Bucket List. I'm really passionate about workplace culture and helping people thrive at work. I've spent a lot of time, over 10 years, in customer-facing and people-focused roles. So I really get to help companies now build strong, joyful, and connected workplaces. I've worked with hundreds of different companies over my years, so I really see what has worked in terms of communication, recognition, and culture. And I really believe that when people feel valued and connected, it changes not just how they work, but how they experience their lives. So I'm very excited today to speak more on this topic, and I would love to pass it over to the next panelist, the lovely Veronica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Veronica Nerona. I am currently Senior Manager of Internal Communications and Events at Plan International Canada. I've been in internal comms for, I'm going to say over 20 years, dating myself a little bit, but that's okay. And so I've seen a lot. I've seen the function grow to what it is today, but I also see some opportunities that still exist across the board. I've worked in billion-dollar organizations, and now I did a little bit of consulting, and currently I'm at a nonprofit. So from a 20,000 population of employees at one company to a three-person company where I help them build a communications functions and everything in between. So I've seen a lot over the years, and I'm excited to share my experience with you in terms of using internal communications as a means to engage your staff, and help build credibility for your leadership team, and ultimately and obviously using that to build trust. And I'll pass it over to Gina.
Great, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gina Romano. I'm the Senior Vice President of People Operations at Centerfield Media. So I've been with this company for about 7.5 years. And in my role as the head of People Operations, it really oversees and touches on all things human resources, from learning and development, HR operations, talent acquisition, talent management, internal communications. Really runs the gamut of all things HR. I've been in human resources for almost 20 years, spanning across different industries and different companies, but always have had such a strong focus on ensuring that communication from the executive team across the board is reached at every level. And it's such an important piece of making sure a company is running smoothly. So super excited to chat today and share some experiences.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for sharing. So excited for this upcoming conversation. We have a lot of votes on the poll, so we'll start by picking your brain on that. I'm sharing the results now. Do you see the little bars coming up?
We do see them. Yeah,
Amazing.
it looks as though we have a very kind of an even spread, with the leading one being how to disseminate messages to employees. I think I voted for that one as well. But across the board, I think the topic of communication is a diverse one with a lot of challenges, and it sounds like they're being felt across. So this will be a good discussion. Hopefully, we can touch on some of these challenges in the webinar.
Amazing. Well, that sounds like a nice segue. I will exit screen and let y'all take it away.
Great. So we have some prepared questions. I will also be keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A box. So if you do have questions, I will try to integrate them. I'll do my best to address as much as we can. But just to kick things off, would love to ask sort of a broader question, which is, when we think about the topic of employee communication and the challenges that come with them, if each of you could share, or just a few of you could share, what comes to mind when you think of a challenge that really stuck with you when it came to communication? And Gina, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if I have one example that is like the most painful one in relation to communication challenges, but I do think there's this common theme that continues to come up at my company over the years. So we do employee pulse surveys, as I'm sure so many of you do on an annual basis. And over the last few years, we had this consistent theme where communication was kind of at the bottom of the barrel and wasn't getting great ratings. And so finally last year, we decided to take a more action-oriented approach and try to figure out, what exactly does this mean when our employees are saying that communication is a challenge here, because it is so broad. So we did roundtables with every person who took the pulse survey, and we heard from every single employee and gathered 1,000 pieces of data around what communication challenges at our company meant. And what was so interesting was that it varied widely depending on the level they were at the company, the location, if they were remote, if they were in office, the segment that they worked for. And so it was difficult to address that communication is a challenge because it meant so many different things. And we tried to kind of filter it by which were the ones that could make the most impact. and then create some action-oriented solutions around that we've implemented over the last year. And we're actually in the midst of our pulse survey right now. So hopefully we will see that some of that came about. But I think the challenge for me when it comes to communication is it is such a big topic. It means so many things to different people, depending on a variety of factors, that it's hard sometimes to address unless you really get to the ground level to identify the most impactful issues and where you could make an impact as a team.
It really speaks to what we saw in the poll results as well, that communication challenges is such a, there's so much wrapped up in it. And it seems like your investigation sort of confirmed that, what we're finding.
Yep.
Jessica, how about you?
Yeah, interesting, that Gina actually brought up surveys, because one thing that I have found over my career is sometimes the problem starts with the survey itself, actually. I hear this time and time again from other people in other companies. I've experienced this myself, where companies actually just survey their employees, but they actually don't do anything with the survey results. I had this experience where a company I worked at once provided the results a year later, a whole year after they surveyed us. And this is very common, where they either don't do anything or they just present the results, but they don't actually, like Gina's saying they're doing the company now, providing like actionable steps to take those results forward. And what I think a lot of companies don't really realize with this is that your employees are trying to communicate with you in the surveys. They're trying to give you the information. And if you don't do anything with it, you're actually losing trust from your employees at that point, because they now have felt like they've opened up to you, they've provided you whatever's not working and what is working, and you've just been dismissive essentially by not doing anything with those results. So to kind of bounce off of what Gina had said there, really encourage companies, if you are going to utilize something like a survey feature, whether it is pulse surveys or other types of surveys throughout the year, that not only are you taking that information and communicating the results back, but actually doing something with it. And you're not always fixing everything, right? Like you can't always look at the whole list and say, okay, this year we're going to tackle all of these. But you can start to set plans in place so that your employees actually feel heard. And then the next time you do that next survey, which is hopefully what's going to happen on Gina's circumstance here, is that you'll start to see better results coming out of it. And employees are going to feel heard, so they're going to feel more open to continue that communication back and forth.
Thanks, Jessica. One of the items that came up in the poll, and one that resonates with me a lot, is the challenge of being in middle management, and you're getting a directive from above to communicate something to your team that maybe you don't even agree with, but you have to then articulate the message and communicate on behalf of the company in a professional way. So I want to hear from each of you, or whomever has sort of a use case in this scenario, on how you've tackled those situations and your own experience with it. And I'll start with you, Veronica.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question, Annie. I think what's different in my function in comparison to my fellow panelists, or my sister panelists, I should say, is that my sole function is internal communications. And I've realized over time that not every organization has an internal comms function. So I think I'm in a bit of a unique position in that I have an opportunity to influence decision making. Having access to senior leaders is key in my function so that I can be at the table to help guide decision making when it comes to sharing information in terms of when and how and where. One of the big challenges for comms is always the challenge between when do we communicate something externally and internally. My advice is always, where you can align in timing, do so. Ideally you inform your employees ahead of anything external, recognizing there are, sensitive topics and such that you want to keep under wraps. But timing it as close as possible is highly effective, and it does help to build trust. in the information sharing. So that's something that I would strongly recommend. You want to look at how you are cascading information. And I think I saw that come up in the survey as one of the top ones. Like they were pretty equal, but one of the top ones was, how do we effectively cascade information? And my advice is, one size does not fit all. So it's not always an email that is going to hit everybody and resonate with everybody. So you do want to consider multiple ways of reaching your audience, whether it is through a leadership forum. Do you call a meeting for like big impacting issues with your leadership team, people leaders that you decide what level, maybe director level and above, depending on your organizational structure, sharing information with them, getting input from them. How do you think this is going to land with staff? What questions do you think they're going to have? So you have that discussion early, and you set a set of consistent messages that you would want to cascade across the board. So I hope that helps answer the question.
It definitely does. And as you were talking, a few comments came through. One from Christina that came up when we all met for the first time a few weeks ago, which is, what if your company is too small to have an internal comms department or team or even individual? How do you address
Yeah.
these same challenges?
That's a great question. And yes, not every company can have an internal comms dedicated person, but there should be somebody who has some accountability for internal comms. And maybe it's a leadership, or maybe it's the HR department, whatever it may be. But there are tons of tools out there available that will support communications efforts. Where it gets tricky is when you don't have somebody who sort of owns that end-to-end strategy of internal comms, then it's like a free for all. So tools, I just saw that pop up. Contact Monkey is one that I use. It's an email tool that provides all kinds of data on email communications. We have an intranet as well. That is another tool. It's a SharePoint platform that doesn't require technical expertise to post information, draft and post information. And as we know, AI is on the rise, or maybe it's just here. So that's another very effective tool. If you don't have somebody dedicated to internal comms, you can train staff to use AI to your benefit to draft concise messaging that'll be relevant for any particular vehicle. They can draft an email message for you, or an intranet post for you, even a social post for you. So yeah, if you can't have a team, then I would say leverage a variety of tools out there.
Thank you, Veronica. And I believe, Jessica, you also had a specific story or experience on the topic of being in the middle of change communications and how you navigate that. I'd love to hear a little bit more on that.
Yeah. So first of all, Veronica, those are great suggestions, especially for those smaller teams. So that's really helpful. So yeah, I wanted to share an experience I had in a previous role where I was managing a team. So I was in that manager in between sort of the top leadership and my team. And we did go through quite a challenging period where there was a lot of shifts that had happened on my team. And essentially, kind of what happened here is there was a period where we were going to backfill some positions, and that's what the team was expecting. That's kind of what they were hanging on to. We were going to backfill the people that had moved and left. And unfortunately, there was a time came where senior leadership decided to make a change and not backfill the team members. And instead, we were going to look at the team processes, if we can bring in tools, if there's other ways to mitigate some of the things we were doing that were overly complicated, and then decide if we needed to backfill at that point. So I'm sure we've all been in similar situations where we've thought one thing was going to happen, and then one day all of a sudden senior leadership comes in and decides it's something different. And I had to be the one to communicate with my team as well about this change that was happening, and it was very challenging. Of course, the team went through all of those change management feelings of resistance and why is this happening? And we felt like we were told one thing and now we're being told something else. So it was quite a difficult time for us to go through as a team. But I felt, in my position and some of what other leadership brought in really helped to overcome what had happened. So, of course, the big thing was really empathizing with our individual contributors, understanding for them that there was a shift that had happened that they weren't aware of, and were essentially told one day that we're changing sort of the team direction. So, really empathizing with how it made them feel and how this would impact their work and their moving forward. A lot of the times, and what I have found throughout management, is people really want to be heard and they want to feel like the leadership is actually paying attention to them and just let them talk and kind of get it all out and really empathize. So really took time to let the team speak freely about how they were feeling, validate their feelings, and help them work through it. Beyond that, another thing that was really useful as well was being really transparent about why the direction had changed. I felt that was really important for the team to understand that it wasn't just a random decision. It wasn't actually really to do with the budget either. It really came down to the fact that by putting another person in, we weren't solving the issues on the team. We were actually just kind of filling a space instead of fixing all of the work that nobody wanted to be doing anyways, because it was frustrating and annoying. So once we, got them to kind of shift their mindset around the change, they understood it. They got it. It made a lot more sense. And that really helped push them through to getting on board with the new processes that were going to come into place. So with those two things, I was really happy. Didn't actually lose anybody on the team. Everybody stuck with me and really wrote out sort of the big adjustment that had happened. And we actually had team members come afterwards to talk about how important it was for them to just even have an open space where they could communicate how they were feeling about the change. I think a lot of times what happens in leadership is that we just tell people what's happening. We tell them what's going to happen next, and we basically tell them they have no choice. And nobody likes that. That's not a nice feeling. But when we can give people the context and the reasons and let them feel their feelings and empathize with them, then they're more likely to come around and understand and then also continue to contribute great work to the team.
You know what's interesting, Jessica, is that I always preach transparency is by far the most important component of communication. But there are times when you just can't be transparent. And I was thinking about how I know there's a lot of HR folks on the call, and in our role, we so often have to keep confidentiality and can't share information. For example, my company went through a restructuring a couple of years ago, and a lot of this decision making was kind of happening with our executive team. However, my HR team was heavily involved in the planning. And unfortunately, as it usually comes to be, rumors started happening and circulating among employees. And it, causes morale issues. There's anxiety on the team. And I think my team really felt caught because as an HR team, they want to help our employees, but they couldn't be transparent. We couldn't share anything yet. We were still working through the nuts and bolts of the restructuring. And so they had this pressure on them. I met with our executive team about, we have some rumors going on. It's causing a lot of anxiety, and my team feels disingenuous by not answering these questions now. So what's something that we could do to try to address it? And we ended up crafting kind of an email and a letter that said, we are working through some changes, and when we can share more, we will. And, it was as carefully crafted as we could, but it's such a challenging place to be in when you can't be transparent. But what I found was that that little bit of communication and that little bit of transparency, giving people kind of the why behind markets shifting and some other things happening at our company, did alleviate some of the stress that was happening within our teams. And then I think the second piece of it was really my role to help my team alleviate the stress they were feeling of kind of being the bearer of bad news to the populations, and reframing it to really be, you're bridging the gap of communication between our leadership team and our employees. And it's your role to kind of come with empathy and show them fairness and, have the conversations as respectfully as possible. And so I think transparency is key. There are times when you can't be transparent, and in those moments it's important to just do the best that you can and try and alleviate as much stress as possible.
Thank you, Gina. That's definitely resonating, I think, with the audience here. We've already gotten into a couple of sort of solutions and tips for improving communications. I think empathy stands out, and transparency as much as possible is also key. Veronica, I wanted to ask you anything else in your experience as an internal comms expert that you can share here on this
I
topic?
think I would just say what Gina said resonated, and transparency isn't divulging everything at every minute to everyone, right? We know that. And sometimes it is. We cannot share with you right now. Information will be coming. Acknowledging that there is a change happening, I think, is very important in an organization, especially if you know that there's been a leak or the rumor mill is in full motion. Simply coming out and saying that information will be shared. We can't share everything right now. I think that that's a signal of transparency in an organization, at least acknowledging that something is happening. And when we can share, we will.
Amazing. On a related note, I think we talk about sharing the information we can. The next layer of question here is what are the mechanics of sharing information? It may be simple if you're at a smaller organization, but the second your company becomes bigger, covering various countries, time zones, cultures, work styles, it becomes a lot more complicated. So I'm curious to hear from I'll start with you, Veronica. I'll pin it right back to you. How do you start to think about cascading information in the context of all that complexity?
Mm-hmm. I would say consistency is key. And, we always use this analogy or phrase, a steady drumbeat is the way to go, and consistently sharing information, not always on the same topic, and that's okay. That's where tools come in, like an intranet. I do strongly promote an intranet as a key communications tool. It can act as an anchor to house information that you want staff to have access to on a regular basis. Gina also talked about the importance of the full circle communication. Jessica did as well, specifically when it comes to employee engagement surveys. That's a really good example to dig into. And again, I know not every organization can have an internal comms person or team. But if it's the HR team, when you're building your survey strategy overall, consider a timely communications plan in that. Doesn't have to be complex, but simply noting when the survey is going to launch, midpoints to promote participation, at the end when it closes, thanking everybody for their participation with a promise we will come back to you. It might take 6 months, but we're going to come back to you and summarize your feedback and then work with you on action planning. That's your steady drumbeat on that particular topic of the employee survey. And ultimately, you'll lead to a full circle and closing the loop on the feedback that they provided you with an action plan. The other thing I would consider is using your communications as a way to build trust. And again, that consistency, steady drumbeat of sharing information is one way to build trust with your audience. And then lastly, I'll say use a variety of tools. I know we're going to talk in a minute about demographics and reaching a variety of demographics, and this will apply as well. But when you can, consider using email as one way to reach your audience. Intranet posts, as I've said before. Most organizations have some kind of social tool, whether it's Slack or Microsoft Teams, whatever it is, that there's a two-way opportunity. I would say use that. And again, I do come back to leveraging your people leaders as a voice for the organization. It obviously has to start at the top, but engaging with leaders at every level and equipping them with what they need, toolkits that will tell them what's happening, when it's happening, most importantly, why it's happening. And then, like I said before, a set of key messages that'll help drive consistency through the organization.
I could piggyback on that, and I think two areas I'd focus on. One is that, as Veronica said, transparency does not mean everything, but it most importantly means the why behind reasons that are being made. So for example, we do a hiring freeze typically once a year. And the reason we do that is to just recalibrate where our company is at. Do we still need these roles? Are these the right positions, costed at the right space, et cetera? And so it can send a bad message if all of a sudden employees just see there's a hiring freeze. So we're very transparent that we want to make sure the long-term health of our business is being considered, and we want to make sure the people we're hiring are the right roles for that growth. That little bit of transparency and the why behind it goes such a long way with employees. They just want to understand what's happening. And then the second piece is, I think you touched on this as well, Veronica, is repeated communication. So we got a new CEO a couple of years ago, and one of the first things he did was immediately increase the cadence of our town halls, going from a quarterly town hall to a monthly town hall. And it was more bite-sized information, more clear and concise information. And it was repeated at the beginning of every town hall. He repeats the same information. These are our 4 pillars. This is our North Star. This is what we're still working towards. This is why we talk about this. Here's our financials that back this up so you understand why we're doing everything. And the clarity and the unsolicited feedback we've gotten from that has been amazing. So increasing the cadence and increasing the why behind was 2 of the big things that our new CEO did that made a huge impact.
That's really, I think I'm also learning as I'm sitting here. I think that's really helpful insight as to how to just make sure that there's alignment across the organization and hearing the vision straight from the source rather than relying on telephone or multiple layers of leadership to relay a message that ultimately is going to get muddled with every iteration. Jessica, anything else you would add to this?
I feel like both of these ladies really touched on a lot of great things. Just a couple of things I would add here. I think Veronica really touched on this kind of like meeting people where they're at. So like really understanding like where your employees work, what languages they speak. Like I'm a really strong believer if you are multi-language, you should be communicating in the languages that people are speaking in. Posting the information in different places. So yes, like meetings, Slack, Teams, emails, and then having the direct managers also really helping with cascading information that might be coming from, some more senior leadership is also really useful. The other thing though that I think is useful to mention, and this is more sort of on a smaller basis, not really necessarily information coming from senior leadership and whatnot, but more on a direct, maybe manager to a direct report. When you are communicating information, especially if it's about that individual, one, you shouldn't be communicating, things they need to work on or fix for the very first time in like a performance review. Employees shouldn't be surprised in a performance review that they're being told that they need to like work on all these things. These should be like communications that are happening throughout the year that are more regular. So I find I've been in the circumstance, I've heard of this before, where all of a sudden, an employee's like, oh, I didn't know that I was doing this thing wrong this whole time, or I needed to fix this thing. And they were only told like at that yearly review. So I'm a really strong believer that, on an individual basis, we should be having these communications very regularly. The other thing, even from an individual perspective, but also from a company perspective, is we should be communicating great things that are happening as well. A lot of communication tends to be about the bad things that are happening, the things we need to fix, the targets we're not hitting. but we really want to be peppering in great things, whether these are individuals that are doing really awesome things, accounts that are being launched, or, sales doing this awesome thing in marketing, put out this great thing, like having these really like positive communications that are happening peppered in with maybe the not so pleasant things. That's what helps to build that trust and also really helps people be more open to maybe the more constructive, not so great sides.
And Jessica, your point. Sorry, go ahead, Veronica.
No, sorry, Annie. I was just going to say that that's a really good practical list of examples that Jessica just shared. And I think that is so, so important to share the good news and leverage your staff to tell stories about them. Share even when you're talking about results, ask your staff, how did we achieve these results? What was your role in this? And develop a series of staff feature stories. Even something like, what did you do over the summer? What was your holiday plan? How did you spend it with your kids? It tends to create a human connection when people start to get to know each other and hear stories about each other. Recognition on various levels, whatever it may be. But I just wanted to build it on what Jessica was just saying about sharing good news as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I've seen both ends of the scale when you're being overly transparent, not overly, but if you're being transparent and you're sharing a little bit too much critical negative, it can bring down the energy of the company. On the other end of the spectrum, I've been in a position where leadership is only sharing the wins, and the people on the ground are saying, hey, it's not as flowery and wonderful as you're making it out to be. It feels like you're disconnected from what we're going through in our day to day. So having a really balanced communication of celebrating wins, but also recognizing and empathizing with the challenges is really important. One other point, just on going back to the mechanics real quick, I'm going through this at HiBob today, which is addressing the challenges of having a really diverse staff across cultures, time zones, languages. It's something that we are experiencing in overdrive right now because we've just acquired a company on the west coast of the US. We have employees all over Europe and the Middle East. And one of the things that we've started to do with the help of AI is leveraging transcribing tools. So in addition to having all hands meetings that are live at multiple times of day to capture all the different time zones, we're recording those meetings. We're doing pre-built videos so that rather than forcing or asking our employees to watch an hour-long all hands, we send them a 5-minute snippet video from the voice of the leader to talk about the key takeaways. And then for the people that don't want to watch a video, we've got the transcription or a summary version of that video. So we're speaking on the topic of meeting people where they are. That's it's been a really successful pilot that we've tried out, and we're going to continue to build on it. But it's one way we can also offload some of the burden that used to be a human task to technology to help support communication.
Mm-hmm.
So shifting. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, definitely leverage, AI and other tools when possible. There's so much useful, so many useful things out there. So if it can take it off your plate, definitely utilize it.
So on the topic of, or furthering this topic of communicating a message, when we don't have the benefit of having all hands meetings and having the CEO or executives speak about what they're working on, we often do have to rely on more levels of leadership to cascade a message. Any best practices that you can share as to how, again, the mechanics of how do you actually ensure that the message is translating properly to the people at the end of the day? Whoever wants to jump in, I'll ask it openly.
I can take it. I think in the companies that I've worked for, the most common theme I've seen is that messaging can get lost with middle management. Executives have this great idea. We're going to communicate this new initiative or project, whatever it may be. And then they have a communication plan. And then there's 100 middle managers who all communicate something differently. And so to address this at Centerfield, we've really focused on having our HR business partners have a strong connection to our middle management group and prep them with messaging kits, scripting, really spoon feeding them the information so that they understand it, they feel like they're a part of it, they're comfortable with it. And then afterwards having briefing sessions. How was it delivered? How was it received? What did we miss? What could we do differently to set you up for success the next time we need to cascade something like this? And so I think in organizations where you have a strong HR business partner team, focusing on them helping the middle management team getting that message to all employees has been the most successful way we've realized to communicate down to every level.
Yeah, I think, Gina, I think you really
Mm-hmm.
really hit it on the head with the messaging kits. And I think to your point, a good thing to keep in mind is that everybody's so individual. So like how I might say something and what I think is maybe the most important thing to say is going to be different than my, a manager in another department. So then it's really easy to kind of have like that like telephone effect where people are just kind of saying different things or maybe not capturing everything that needs to be said to their team. So I really like the idea of like a messaging kit so that it's really streamlined for everybody. It's all sort of the same message that's going out. And then, of course, if people have, if the managers are having questions, they also have that opportunity to really ask and understand before they provide that messaging down to their teams.
Getting a little
Yeah,
bit,
go ahead.
sorry, I just wanted to say we're getting a few follow-up questions on the topic of messaging kits. People want to know a little bit more about what does that actually mean? Veronica, maybe this sounds like it's right in your
Yeah.
wheelhouse. What can you share about what messaging kits are made up of?
Yeah, sure. So typically it is topical in nature. So your first section is an overview of what the topic is. Then you would typically have objectives of that particular initiative. You do have key messages where it gets tricky. I just saw somebody pop in a comment around verbatim messaging or verbatim scripts. I don't recommend that ever. That's where you lose authenticity and potentially impacting trust. So you want to be careful and not call it a script, call it key messages and word it in such a way that it gives pointed bullet points of what it is that you want to convey. And the intention of that is to drive consistency in the messaging. So you could even put a wrapper in that section of key messages in your toolkit that says like this is not a script, avoid reading this verbatim. These are key points for you to list out as you are talking with your staff. You should also include a timeline of when you want these discussions to be had. Make some suggestion on how. Would you recommend face-to-face meetings or a hybrid meeting where you're talking to staff, or is it more appropriate for a one-on-one discussion? It really does depend on the nature of what it is that you're communicating. But you can you can actually do it in one page. Brevity is key. People are busy, they don't have a lot of time, especially at the people leader level. But you want to, if you can fit it into one page, then that would be a recommended. I can put in the sections in the chat so that people can take it away. But that's typically how I create. I have a template that I use that's repeatable, no matter the topic.
And I imagine ChatGPT and other AI tools are probably really helpful in building these
Absolutely.
sorts of things out. So it doesn't need to be all on you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So moving towards in a little bit of a different direction, I wanted to talk a bit about how to break down silos and cross-functional communication gaps. So as far as practical, actionable things that can be done, Veronica, I'll head it back to you here. How do you approach the topic of or the challenge of departmental silos and communication?
Yeah, I mean, bringing people together is really key. And while not always possible physically, it depends on, your organization makeup. I'm hearing a lot of international organizations. So now we have the luxury of technology where we can bring people together virtually as we are doing today. So I would recommend considering open forums for discussions, ideation sessions that are guided by the subject matter expert, or maybe somebody on the learning and development team, or a trainer per se, to host ideation sessions. And you want to be strategic in who you're inviting to these meetings, ensuring that you've got a really good cross section of people across the organization. So it's not all operations people in one ideation session, not all marketing, but you have a really good cross mix. That's one way to break down silos. And leaders also have to walk the talk. It's so, so important for leadership to demonstrate an aligned front when they are together with staff. I think Gina was talking about CEO-led town halls, always a great idea. But then there also should be some representation of the senior leadership team that report to the CEO that show up as well, and maybe co-presenting a topic, marketing and comms, or HR and operations, co-presenting a particular topic. They're setting the tone at the top. And then when you're reaching out to staff to break down their silos, they're already seeing it happen at the top. And so they'll be maybe a little bit more open to joining in on an ideation session with somebody not on their immediate team, or even within their same function. There's so much richness in a conversation where everybody is not the same and doesn't do the same job. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Really good, Veronica. The ideation session, I think, is a really powerful tool companies can use, not only from the standpoint of really garnering trust amongst everybody, but the ideas, right? What comes out of, like you said, all of those different people in the different departments and different levels, you can really, really come up with some great things. I think to add on to this, when we're thinking about silos, especially in a world now that is very distributed, whether it's people are working online or they're just in different locations, something that we find is really helps break down silos is having something like a recognition program or tool that can be utilized across the entire company. So just having something that is sort of that central location where communication is happening. It is obviously very positive communication because it's recognitions and awards that are happening. So it is very uplifting, but it is just a really great way for people to have that connection with everyone else in the company and see what's happening in other departments. And this is really powerful, I find, even for myself. And we're not even that large of a company, but we are distributed. And it's really cool to see what's happening in the other departments. And it just gives you that greater respect and visibility as well. So that's another really great tool that can help sort of break down those silos and keep everybody in a centralized location.
All right. We are just about up on time, so I want to make sure we have time to answer this one last question, and then hopefully we can get one or two Q&A questions in as well. But just to close here, if someone listening today could implement just one strategy to improve their communication effectiveness this week, what would you recommend? Gina, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we haven't really touched on this today, but I think up there with transparency, one of the most important pieces of communication is active listening. And one of the biggest points of frustrations that employees can feel is when their manager is not a good listener and does not actively listen to them. They interrupt them, they don't really hear them, they're multitasking. And so I think like when you can build an executive team or a leadership team that has strong active listening skills and start from the top to cascade that down, it goes such a long way, and it takes out so much stress from the employees who aren't feeling heard. And it just sets the right tone. So I actually have worked with Think Human for the last 7 years and partnered with them to have cohorts of manager training to help our managers be better active listeners, build stronger empathy, which results in more trust, preventing misunderstandings. I mean, it's such a cascading effect. So if you feel like active listening is an opportunity, I would say start to figure out, where is the issue stemming from? Is it stemming from the top? And how can you kind of work your way down through the org to help all of your leaders be better active listeners and hopefully instill a stronger sense of empathy amongst your teams?
Thanks, Gina.
I love that, Gina. Active listening is huge. Nothing will turn someone off from being communicative if they don't feel like the other person is not listening. To kind of bounce off of that, I'm going to go with it. Something you can do this week is recognize someone on your team, someone in a company. If recognition's not already part of sort of your culture, get the ball rolling by doing it yourself. Send a Slack message, post a little note, put a note on someone's desk. Just really opening up that sort of positive and uplifting communication, and then having it sort of cascade over when you need to maybe deliver some not so great communications. So I'd really encourage everyone to give someone a recognition this week.
All right, Veronica, bring us home. Any final tips before we go?
I would say have a conversation and ask your leadership team, and I'm sure there's a meme for this statement. What's the cost of investing in internal communications to drive consistency and engagement versus what's the cost of not investing?
Tough question to answer, but I hope it speaks for itself.
Mhm.
Amazing. All right. With that, I am going to pass it back to our host, Rebecca, who's going to close out our session today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All the stories, all the tips and tricks. There's so many questions. So I know it definitely resonated with folks, and we'll just move through this next wrap up part really quickly so we can have some time for Q&A. So let me share my screen again. This is the part of the session where I'd love to just pass around the circle and let every organization kind of share a little bit more about the work that they do and how it can help with the communication strategy in your organization. So I'll kick things off with Bucket List. We are a rewards and recognition platform. And as Jessica mentioned, recognition is just such an important part of building trust and good communication. So if you're interested in seeing what recognition can do for your organization's communication cascade, we'd love to chat. Let me just quickly put up a poll here. And we're also excited to share that we're now a certified HiBob integration partner. So we're really excited, Annie, just to see that official marketplace listing. All right, I am also Contact Monkey today. So Contact Monkey helps internal communicators reach every employee with clarity and impact. Like Veronica mentioned, there is the email campaign tool to real-time engagement insights, and their tools really just help make it easier to connect teams, reinforce leadership messaging, and drive meaningful change across organizations. Ooh, sorry, Annie, would you like to chat about HiBob?
Sure. For those who don't know HiBob hosts Bob, which is an HR software. It's an HRIS plus a whole lot more. And on the topic of communications, it has a social feed that allows for real-time communication across your company, as well as kudos for real-time recognition. So if you haven't looked into it, please take a look, do a Google, or respond to the poll to ask for more info.
Thanks, Annie. I also Think Human. So Think Human is a manager training and leadership development company that offers training like communication and